Okay, welcome. So today we are celebrating this awesome exhibition, My Body, My Rules, curated by Jennifer Inacio. And as part of this exhibition, we are presenting Performance Four Ways. And we're kicking off today's programming with a talk featuring artists Coralina, Rodriguez Meyer, Sandra Vivas, and Jennifer Inacio. My name's Marie Vickles. I'm the Director of Education, and I want to thank you all for joining us today. I also want to give some big shout outs and thank yous to the team that makes all of this work possible. Anita Bram, Associate Director of Adult Programs and Audience Engagement. Thank you. Woo. Laz on the cameras. Thank you so much. Lazaro, we couldn't do it without you. And of course, our audiovisual team, Denise Faxis and Andrew Bird holding it down, bringing the sounds and video all together. So thank you, everyone. And all of you joining us out there on YouTube Live, thanks. Post questions, let us know what you think, and let's get today's program started. So we brought together these artists to talk about their work, to talk about engagement with audiences as performance artists, and the themes that they're going to be presenting today in their presentations. I'd also like to mention there are two artists that are also presented in today's performance program. Tara Long, aka Poor Girl, who has a video work running on a loop in the auditorium, and installation work, an interactive installation work by Yanira Collado, which is on the East Terrace, the East Portico Terrace right here outside, that you can take a look at, interact with, and enjoy. So let's get started with our talk. Jennifer, if you can tell us a little bit about the exhibition for the folks that are here that maybe haven't made it inside the galleries yet, and then we can get started with the artists, kind of seeing how their work intersects with that exhibition.
Sure. Thank you so much, Marie, for putting this amazing program together, and thank you for Coralina, Sandra, and Yanira, and Tara Long for also participating. The exhibition opened in November. It's a group exhibition of 23 artists, female identifying artists, drawn primarily from Pam's collection. The idea behind My Body, My Rules is to compile all of these voices that are questioning and examining stereotypes, ideals imposed on women's roles and idea within society that society pushes on women. Some of them are just bringing up to our attention, and a few others are giving that empowerment too. So even the title itself I see as this chant of empowerment, for women to take control over their voice and authority over their story, and eliminate any other authority and power that is imposed on their bodies and their story. So what's also interesting about the exhibition is that we have artworks from the 60s up until 2020, so that's also an interesting dialogue, and also national artists. So it's really a mix of voices, and that was the idea, for these voices to come together and pronounce this chant of empowerment, My Body, My Rules. And what I see here, what's happening today, the artists are also drawing on these thematics that are still so relevant, that we see coming from the 60s and are still today, but also I love the various layers that are not just within the show, but are also happening here. The idea of inclusivity and diversifying these voices.
Wonderful, thank you. So if you haven't had a chance to go inside the galleries or come to the museum, I strongly encourage you to check the exhibition out. It's beautiful, it's powerful, it's inspiring. Okay, let's start with you, Coralina. Tell us a little bit about the work that is going to be activated today, and yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks so much for having me and inviting us for this really amazing show you've curated, Jennifer. Sorry. Yeah, so I guess I'll just give a quick background of the project. And this is had an arc of 4 years now. After the 2016 election, I started a national underwear audit to collect worn-out women's underwear through the U.S. Postal Service to sew into cunt quilts at Stitch and Bitch craft salons. We sew the underwear onto queen-size bed sheets, and then we have conversations about different virtues and values of the feminist movement, intersectional feminist movement. And then we carry the quilts on our backs, or arpilleras on our backs, to demonstrate our intersectional feminist movement and to create evidence. And so the project is about accounting for our bodies while holding our governing bodies accountable. And it's a quarterly audit, so clear out your drawers, ship them to me, and then we kind of really evaluate and analyze the ways in which our bodies are directly impacted by structural violence. And it was really important for me as an artist to consider kind of the histories that we are performing, and I talk about the project as a performance of citizenship in 3 acts. And, you know, of course, looking back historically, accounting for our bodies in that kind of ancestral way. So looking at kind of the arpilleras desaparecidos de Chile, like during Pinochet's dictatorship, how, you know, these abuelas and mothers who lost their indigenous loved ones to the genocide, they were collecting worn out pieces of their clothing and then creating these beautiful arpilleras. There's a strong tradition in the United States also of whether it's the Underground Railroad quilts or the AIDS quilt, for example. So it's really kind of harnessing that history and, of course, you know, looking at the kind of performances of citizenship by social justice leaders of yesteryear and of today. So today, this is now the 16th cunt quilt that we'll be creating as a collaborative object. And today we're going to be looking at disability justice and kind of auditing where the movement is, how can, you know, others in the United States perform our citizenship in meaningful, impactful ways. So the project really is about kind of not only looking to the past to create a future and to lay out a path forward, but also to consider democracy kind of this everyday act. And so, yeah, I'm really excited. We've got some really amazing speakers that are leading the movement in various ways, but also some artists who have to kind of perform that dual citizenship in a way, because it's not enough anymore for our generation to simply create images. Although that's important, it's also, you know, we have to have this direct action component to our practice because of our various intersectional challenges. And so I'm really excited about celebrating National Women's History Month and the exhibition because I feel that through the disability justice movement, it's not only the largest minority group in the United States, but it also represents all of the intersections of our citizenship. So I'm just really excited about that and being in conversation with the artists in their works, but also the other incredible artists who are performing today. So thank you.
Thank you, Coralina. Thank you so much. And this brings us now to Sandra Vivas. And tell us about your work and what we can expect today, but not too much.
Well, I'm just going to talk about kind of like the elements that we're going to be seeing today in my performance. There is an element that I'm going to be using, which is a cape, a very long cape, that it's a commentary in the artwork that is in the front, which is, I guess, south, is that right? The other side of the ham. It's by Soto, Venezuelan artist.
Yes.
And my cape is an homage to Eugenio Espinosa, who is a Venezuelan who made an artwork in response to Soto. So his artwork name series is called Impenetrables, because Soto was penetrable or penetrable, which can have all kind of connotations. And also we lived in the same cave with another artist work, Gego, a Venezuelan German artist who came basically escaping war and Holocaust in the 40s. And during the time, Soto was like huge, and these very artworks being made with with a lot of what do you say, like you needed almost like a ¿cómo se dice fábrica?
Fabrica?
You needed like a depot. You needed a lot of people to make these big installations. Mm-hmm. And she was working with almost like pobre materials, wire, paper, cutouts of magazine, making her tejeduras. And I'm making kind of like a replica or like my own version of one of her dibujos sin papel, drawings without paper. So it's more, although there is a lot of images, you know, that I am going to be also wearing another element, very important. It's fouet, which is Dominican whip. In Dominica, we have a very strong African traditions, including carnival, and I'm wearing also a mask that it's inspired both in the mask-wearing traditions of carnival and the kind of mask wore during the Middle Age, during the big plague. And so like that entrance is kind of like me cleaning the space with that whip, because in Africa, in the villages, that was the purpose of the fouet. But of course it has many other connotations, and part of my work is to bring out or make people aware of their own gaze, you know, like what happens when you see a woman with the legs spread. You know, the female body is never a neutral body. The neutral body is always the man's body. So whatever we do is immediately has a series, whatever movement literally has a series of connotations. I also question the notion of like success versus failure. And I don't like to give like these are just like clues to have, you know, an idea, but each person can bring what they see into the work. I'm gonna be also singing La Habanera, Carmen's opera by Bizet. And I'm not a singer, and it's not about the talent of my singing, but the meaning of this a stereotype of what is to be a woman, or the expectations of about women and sexuality and sex appeal and femme fatale and us creating I mean women creating dramas, you know, because I think a lot of the struggles that I have personally belong in my own head first, right? But it's of assimilated ideas about what is to be a woman, and not necessarily from constrictions that I have outside myself.
Right. Sometimes those constrictions are in here.
That's right. That's the idea.
So, two very different kind of engagements or activations, performances, if you will. But there's one element that is, you know, that brings performance art together today, and just as a general kind of body of work that we see out there, and that is audience. So, in each of your works, you do, you know, you are considering how the audience like engages or approaches the work or interacts with it in different degrees. And even in the My Body, My Rules, Jen, as a curator, you set up the space, and you've really thought about how, when folks come to the gallery, how they're going to walk through the space. What do they see first, second, third? How do they feel this space out? And I'm curious about, you know, because in education, we're always thinking about our audiences. I'm curious about audience engagement in terms of, like, everyone that's here, like, we're here for everyone sitting on these bleachers, walking around, watching on YouTube, you know, like this is for you. And I want to, I guess, just ask each of you, we could start with you, Jen, when you think about who's going to view this work, how they're going to interact with it, what is your, I guess, hope for that audience?
Yeah, I think something that Sandra really brought up too are these questions and issues that are in our own head too. So that immediately brings me back to that back wall on the exhibition where we have a lot of photographic works. And even when I was curating that wall, you know, there's a compilation of some images that are women portrayed in sensual sexual poses, and it also made me think, okay, so how is the male gaze interfering ourselves as well? So that is an interesting point that I want, you know, people to question, but also turn their heads a little bit more to the female gaze, because there are some works there, like I always talk about Micheline Thomas, where she is capturing her lover at the time, and although she is sitting in a sensual pose, she is also showing the human element of that. So how can we use this male gaze and then transfer it to, you know, a female gaze with us humanizing the subject that we are capturing if it's a female figure. And so that is definitely one, I think, experience that I want people to question and see within yourselves too. You know, I'm always thinking about, as a person, as a woman, trying to understand in my own head the things that I do. Am I being influenced by all these voices in society, or is this something I want to do? So definitely little moments like that in the exhibition. But then, of course, at the entrance too, right? We did the title wall painted super large letters, really bold letters, and it was painted. It was actually painted, hand painted and designed by Pam's graphic designer, Pamela Gonzalez. And going back to the collaboration idea behind Coralina's work too, like I think it's definitely important to bring these voices. Unfortunately, with COVID, I couldn't have a lot of women painting this title together, but that's as far as we could go. But also to highlight that, right, like voices coming together, the title, as soon as you enter, you see these bold letters in your face, the same way that you see these bold statements in women's marches and posters, you know, crying out this statement of empowerment. So that obviously speaks a lot to Frances Goodman neon sign, which is right at the entrance, and she advocates for that, right? For women to spit out your own words. The title of the wall is Spit Swallow, which of course has a sexual connotation to it as well. But then the other meaning is, you know, women's voices have always been suppressed, and we've been, you know, told to not put our ideas out there, and she is inviting you to do that, to spit that out, spit your ideas, spit your voice out and your statement. So those, I think, are two impressive moments within the exhibition that I want people to take in, and one happens at the entrance and then one happens towards the back. So, and of course in between those two moments there's many other ideas and questions brought up for people to ponder on.
Thank you, Jen. And just to give everyone a little context on the wall, so typically our walls are like the entrance walls, or like the text that you see inside the museum. It will be vinyl lettering. It's like generated by a computer, cut out, and then stuck on the wall. But for this particular wall that she's talking about, how many people worked on that?
I was just, because we had to keep it limited, right. Me, myself, Maritza Lacayo, our curatorial assistant, and Pamela Gonzalez, who designed the sign. But we came in on a weekend, hand-painted with the genie lip, trying to figure it out. So it's also, you know, this act of solidarity, like one helping each one out. You know, it was... definitely. I definitely felt that too. Like the two girls coming in together and helping make this happen.
So beautiful, because that's definitely like kind of a rare I guess, action for us to make as a museum within like the exhibitions. Like, okay, the curators and the graphic crew is gonna like get together and paint the wall to make it happen, and it looks beautiful.
Thank you.
Just a great way, a great kind of energy to start the show with. So again, thinking about like audience engagement, interaction, like for each of you as artists, what are some of the things that are important to you to share with the audience and that you hope that they will take away from the work that you make, whether it's here today or just in general, knowing about your work as an artist? Whoever wants to dive into that can take it. You want to?
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, I think maybe piggybacking on these notions of kind of spitting and recalling the kind of processes of the body, I'm really interested in creating tools for sculpting democracy, which I feel the audience is the author and the sculptor of our democracy, the public, the citizens of this country, who can have the privilege to represent those who are not. So I'm really interested in those hidden kind of processes, and the abject is part of that, and that culture and kind of revealing. I think in Wangechi Mutu's work, for example, she's interested in the notion of kind of the body without organs and sort of showing those orifices. You know, there is the abject in that work. I did want to bring up this John Lewis quote, which I love, which he says from his Across the Bridge memoir. Freedom is not a state, it's an act. It's not an enchanted garden perched high on a distant plateau where we can finally sit down and rest. Freedom is the continuous action we must all take, and each generation do its part to create an even more fair and more just society. I think that's kind of the perfect counter to respectability politics, which we often inherit as kind of having to perform that structure. So I'm interested in kind of breaking through that Garden of Eden notion and presenting kind of the rawness, but also the humor that allows access to these conversations, which can rebuild our agency.
I love it. I think that's one of the things I really appreciate about your work as well. It's like these are very difficult and not like fast topics or issues with like fast solutions, but you know, like to see them as like to see them more holistically and to see like kind of the silliness in some of the like the futility of what we're doing at times. You know, like that is damaging to ourselves, but to also seek to like improve these things and change it. I really appreciate that in your work a lot. So Sandra, can you also, I guess, like, what is it you hope audiences will take with them when?
Well, I like to make questions more than to give like an answer, although I love Coralina's approach of actually taking an actual action to exercise democracy, and I think that is necessary. My approach is different because it's more in the contemplative and in what you want to take. You know, it's a lot freer in terms of the interpretations, and it's more open, or at least I hope it's more open. Also, though, the part of humor for me is also important, and the silliness of the actions that you will soon see. It's okay to laugh.
Yeah, it's necessary, right? What is
Absolutely.
life without laughter?
Yeah. But my hope is that in the process of questioning, I am not like slapping the people with my ideas, but just making people question their own ideas about the stereotypes of women, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, critical thinking, that's crucial.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a few minutes right now if we have any questions from the audience. I do want to shout out Yanira Collado. She's here today. Thank you for being here. So she has this installation piece at the top of the terrace. If you have a chance, please go by, interact with it, engage with it. So those of you that are here, do you have any questions you'd like to ask the artist, Jennifer, our curator here, if you have had a chance to see the exhibition, or even if you haven't? we'll take some questions. Yes. Okay, a question from the audience. Why, for Sandra, why Carmen?
Well, Carmen, I've been working for a while with like anthems and arias from operas, because at least for me they represent icons that we have in our unconscious. Sometimes we're more aware of it, sometimes we're not. But specifically, Carmen is one of those, it's one of many actually of those icons of freedom, like Madame Bovary. It's made it into an opera. Women who have a lot of agency, a lot of power. In her case, she's absolutely free about the way she loves, yet she gets killed by Bizet at the end, right? And I have had this obsession, I would say, with the lyrics about what love is. Yeah, and I think it's everywhere. Like Carmen is everywhere. We don't realize that da 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 da. Oh, that's Carmen. It's in many like pop culture. We consume it, Carmen, all the time, but we just don't. We're not aware of it.
Right.
And it's
Just for folks that may not know, Carmen is an opera. Do you want to give a little more about?
Carmen is the opera by Bizet, and I'm going to be singing the Habanera, which is the most sung and well-known aria of that opera.
Cool. I hate to do this as a pop quiz, but do you know when Carmen when it first came out?
It's in the 1800s, late 1800s. Okay. Yeah.
Well, that dropped 1800s. Late 1800s. Nice. Okay. Any other questions? Comments?
I do just want to Is this on?
Doesn't sound like it.
No? Okay. I just want to piggyback on Carmen and this figure of, woman, because when I was, and we kind of talked about this on the chat this morning. I sent a message that your work and Carmen and this new voice, this new story that you're giving to Carmen with, a happier ending, also makes me think a lot about Have Karaham's painting within the exhibition, where if you look at it, it looks so subtle. It's just painted. It's very loud. It's this very subtle painting, but once you approach it, you see these 6 figures that are from a series of paintings that she did based on contortionists. And Have Karham is from Baghdad. She has left as a refugee and is now based in LA, but she puts this figure of this exoticized Middle Eastern woman in her paintings a lot. And for this series of contortionists, she is capturing these women in these very uncomfortable yet also fetishized poses, right, with the flexibility, and their genital areas are emphasized. So although they're put, you see them in this uncomfortable position and being objectified, or, maybe even taking ownership, how Carmen's story was. She had this jealous lover, almost like controlling her. Yet they look back with this powerful gaze towards the viewer, not succumbing, not submitting to this gaze, and really taking ownership, knowing, understanding that they're being put in this place of uncomfort. Yet they feel very confident and ready to take on, ready to take over. So I don't know if you.
Absolutely, and that's one of the artworks that I connected the most. Not just because it's presented a lot in all the publicity for the exhibit, but that fetishization of certain postures of women. It's something that I'm very, very interested in. And questioning it, hopefully with a wink, so what is it that makes it so fascinated and want to, and it's seductive, and it's kind of like hypnotic in a way. Those images that are so highly fetishized, yes. And I've used it in many of my artworks when I do the inverted posture, which also has to do about the, inverting meanings or inverting roles, or seeing things from a different perspective as well.
Yeah.
I think just to kind of continue on this notion of the gaze, it's also important, I think I saw a kind of line thinking about the distance of the body to surveillance and the gaze, but also being seen.
Yeah.
And I think, Sandra, what's interesting about sort of your whipping gesture and kind of recalling these celebrations of ceremony, like in the carnival, but also kind of reclaiming that view from the audience and then kind of throwing it back at them through this very firm gesture. I mean, I think those themes are so central to what it means to be an American, not only in North America, but the Americas, and negotiating colonialism and kind of, I'm really interested in how the artists in the exhibition, but also in our performance, we're negotiating that iconography and how we sort of align ourselves with those images that in some ways can control us because we're sort of inheriting this burden visually, whether it's wearing makeup or having to wear high heel, and how we can kind of reclaim that and be seen. I think particularly in protest, there's very much that walk of, I remember the first protest in D.C. In the Women's March in 2016 or 2017, that all of a sudden, as soon as the military people with the cameras saw us coming with the cunty underwear, they suddenly sort of zoomed in and caught our faces, and it was just like this really shocking experience of going from sort of the humor of the underwear to kind of the risk, involved, and how different levels of risk are involved in citizenship performance. And I think particularly to contextualize that in the larger political sphere, we just, the governor of this state just passed a law that essentially made protest more or less illegal yesterday. So it's really interesting to think about the gaze and surveillance regarding risk and who has the privilege and ability to perform versus those who are hidden and perhaps encouraged to be contained. So I think this is something that is very exciting in the work of feminist creators in both the past and then moving forward. How do we kind of reclaim that and build our strength to move forward and to continue to dissent against that?
Absolutely.
I have a question
Yes,
for Coralina, maybe relating even to this. For sure. But when I was, when people ask me, like, who is this exhibition for? It's not just for women, of course. It brings up all of these issues, and that question came up, and it just made me kind of examine and look at, other programs or other exhibitions, or mainly programs that are derived with this approach, but it's not very inclusive of others, right? And I guess what I'm trying to get at, like, for example, there's this one reading club about a feminist reading group, actually based in London, and because of COVID, I was able to attend, and I used to go there when I lived there for a while, but and I was very intrigued that, it wasn't just all women. And I'm like, great, great that there are men here wanting to discuss these issues that are not, directly affecting them. And with your work, like, how do you, get people that are not directly affected by these issues that are being brought up? How do you get them engaged? Do you find difficulties, or how do you cross that line in reaching a much larger audience, beyond these issues that are...
I think that's a really great question. I just want to point out, so this weekend obviously is a lot of things are starting to open up. It's like this spring opening, COVID, there's all these things going on. We're directly in competition with the digital Van Gogh exhibit, which has been sold out for some time. So I think I was really struck by that because, that's accessible art for a lot of people. And I grew up in a community that I never went to museums. My family never went to museums. They were ashamed that I was an artist. And so I became an architect and urban designer, and that was my day job that was acceptable and accessible as a means of, not only creating income, but also having a place in society. And I think that process of assimilation is what creates this stigma and the shame that people may at first be kind of put off by the underwear or something sort of very intimate about the body. But I think that, this question of beauty is where you can kind of create this push and pull. And obviously with the abject, I've had a curator say that the work is very in your face and it's too, it's off-putting, right? I think that the humor is maybe the entry point for a lot of folks, especially, de mi familia, they're not necessarily people who are gonna be donating their underwear through the U.S. Postal Service. But I think that at the protests actually is where the work has evolved the most, because seeing, a 7-year-old sort of giggle at the underwear and then want to come up closer and just to inspect it, and it's almost like it's very disarming in many ways, the humor, and in some ways that draws in the same way that perhaps beauty or something like a Van Gogh, where you could see it at a distance one way and then approach it closer and to understand the texture. I think that's similar to the way in which we have to deal with democracy, and so the process of seeing and then engaging the work is very much a physical one, then, in that you have to enter it in some ways and get closer. And so I think the humor really does the work, the heavy lifting in a way, and the silliness, as you say, because how else do we survive these kind of violent attacks, like what happened in Atlanta to the AAPI community? I mean, these are pretty consistent images and paintings, if you will, of American Gothic, right? So I think operating in these visual terms of the grotesque or the abject being sort of the baseline, it's like we can jump over that through humor and we can enter in that way. So I do think that at first it's very different from your work, Sandra, in that way, in that, you kind of have to jump over the big hump first, but then once you enter, I think it creates a kind of ease and comfort to engage and create more kind of direct engagement, I hope.
Yes. Wonderful. Thank you. This has been a great conversation. Oh, we have a question from YouTube. Okay.
First on Coralina. New York City, Miami has more emphasis on body. How does this affect body?
So compared to New York City, Miami has more of an emphasis on bodies. How does this affect body-centric artwork here in Miami, I guess, specifically?
Wow.
That's a good one.
That's a really good question. Okay, so Kurt is amazing. He was a collector of my work before I started doing the underwear audit and the Arpilleras project. So I'm really excited about that question because I think that, for a lot of Latinx women or femme-identifying people, there is a strong push to perform and look a certain way, whether it's Botox, whether it's, pestañas every day, or if it's, body dysmorphia and modification. I grew up identifying as a boy, so for me, the kind of process of entering more feminine identifying means was really quite an arc in Miami. And I think I've had a lot of other conversations with artists who grew up in Miami in terms of understanding how that really influences your perception of yourself depending on what other intersections you're coming from, whether it's, pelo buena, or whether it's, just going through those processes. I think it's just more processing, right? And it's more sort of jumping over these hoops. But I think I joked to you, Marie, about curatorial Botox, right? Like that in a lot of ways, we are injecting sort of these notions of larger identity construction of ourselves and what we should be and how we should assimilate into our bodies and into the way that we present ourselves. It also can come out in the artwork too. I think I'm the work I was making prior to the cunt quilt was not as sort of in your face or not as offensive as having 11s, I think, especially for our generation of feminists, I think having, more sort of control over our image and thinking about how social media really puts a kind of burden and pressure on us to look a certain way. That's why I became more interested in the abject as a way to kind of break through some of those constructions, those identity constructions that we all sort of build every day. So what a great question. Yeah.
So we could definitely keep going. I think the sun would probably take us out for that. But at 1:30, we will have Sandra's performance starting at the top of the terrace. So
And then it'll be
coming down the stairs and ending right here behind us on this stage that you see. So thank you all for being a part of this today. Thank you, Coralina, Jennifer, Sandra. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you for being
So stick
here.
around, grab some coffee or some tea at Verde, or go inside, see the exhibition if you haven't already, and join us outside at the terrace at 1:30 p.m. for the performance.
Thank you.